So what do you think? What would be, you've probably trained what, 300, 200, 300
Right.
Agora related
Yeah.
copywriters and other, friends who are in businesses, probably more with AWI included. What what do you think is the biggest mistake that they make?
Well, I love pointing out mistakes that people make, as you know, John, especially
Yes.
copyright. So I have so many to choose from. I do have one that I think of as the most common and also the most serious mistake. But before I tell you that, I'm going to just mention that I think there are three mortal sins that writers can make and they need to avoid. The first is ignorance, and the second is laziness, and the third is arrogance. Ignorance is ignorance of the subject matter you're writing about, and ignorance of your audience, and that's what basically copywriting schools teach. Um, Arrogance is what happens when you get to be a pretty good copywriter and you decide that you know it all, and
Right.
what happens when you get arrogant is you typically get lazy and you fall back on your old habits. And so the cure for ignorance, the cure for arrogance is humility, and the cure for ignorance is laziness. And so finally, at the end of the day, it all comes out to be about working. But you can't just work and be successful. So um, I've always felt that there's really not a big difference between copywriting and editorial writing. The only real difference is, well, let me just say, when I say editorial writing, between copywriting and other forms of rhetorical writing. Rhetorical writing is the kind of writing is persuasive writing. And if you're writing a political piece in a magazine, or you're writing an editorial in the New York Times, or you're writing a sales letter, the purpose is to persuade somebody of an idea or an interpretation of facts or so on. So that's what we do as copywriters. And I discovered this when I started writing Early to Rise, which is a daily blog, and I was just, I would knock out different things every day and whatever suited me. And I notice a lot of blog writers do that today too. And I noticed that the blogs that were best received, and also pretty much the ones that I like the best, had three characteristics. They were usually on an engaging subject. They had a low FK score, which we'll talk about in a moment, and they were centered around an emotionally compelling idea, a single idea. So I'm going to just stop there and go back and say that I would say the mistake that most copywriters make most commonly, and that's most hurtful to their work, is what I call the toss salad approach to copywriting. I think we've talked about that before. What happens is you're going to write a promotion on like cancer or trading options or what have you, and what you do is what many copywriters do is they first of all read a bunch of advertising pieces on that subject, and then they may if they're selling an information product, they may read through the product itself. And they accumulate a lot of interesting little bits and pieces along the way. And they start writing, trying to cram all these bits and pieces into the copy. So I think of it as a tossed salad. There's all kinds of interesting things in there. There's cucumbers, there's tomatoes, there's onions, there's chicken if you want it. Whatever you've got, they're going to put it in there because they hope that at the end of the day, they'll attract the most number of people. But that's really not the way rhetoric works. We don't end up being emotionally compelled to take action based on a profusion of small little insights and ideas. Usually it comes from a very well articulated presentation of a single idea. So,
right. Well,
go ahead.
can I jump in? And I want to tack this on because I heard you talking about this in another presentation, and you used a phrase that I really like, which is you were talking about the closet of your own mind. How you were taking somebody on a tour.
Sorry, say that again.
The closet, a tour of the closet of your mind.
Oh, right, so, right.
Where like somebody's going through and seeing all these things in there. I think part of it, part of the impulse that makes people do that is that exactly that thing that you just described, which is you're fascinated by all the stuff. You want to put it in there because you want it to work, and you're trying to attract everybody. Mm-hmm. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the writers have different personalities, and some are needier than others, and some are more arrogant than others. Mm-hmm. That thing of like trying to force everybody to, it's either because you're needy because you really want everybody to respond to it, or you're arrogant because you think, damn it, if I think this is good, they should think this is good. I also think there's another aspect, which is just raw curiosity. Ogilvy used to talk about how curiosity is the distinguishing factor for good copywriters. Mm-hmm. And
no, you're absolutely right. And
we love all this stuff, so we pour it in.
No, the smartest copywriters are most likely to get into this trap because you are curious, and if you're reading material that's a little bit fresh, new to you, you're taking down notes on all kinds of interesting bits and pieces. So if you just go right then and start writing, you're going to try to cram everything. And I do this almost every time I write about a subject that I'm not too familiar with. Like, in my blog today, if I write about politics or if I write about economics, like macroeconomics, I don't have it's usually stimulated by my reading. And so to be responsible, I come away, I read one editorial that moves me, that's usually on one topic. And then to be responsible, I read like 8 other things. And by the time I'm done, I've got, 140 different ideas, and I'm trying to cram them all in there. And I don't know what my motivation is. Part of it is vanity. I just want to show off all the things that I found. They're like little jewels that you're adorning your body with. And part of it is I don't want to give anything of them up. When you have the story. I took Dale Carnegie course once, and we had to identify our 10 top ambitions in life, and then we had to narrow them down to 3, and then we had to pick one. And for the next 14 weeks, all we could do is pay attention to that one. And I had like 100. Dale Carnegie said in the chapter, most people don't have enough ambitions, but some people have way too many. And I had about 100. I narrowed them at 10. It was unbelievably painstaking to bring them down to 3. And then I got them down to 3, and I couldn't really decide. I just, the 3 were teaching, writing, and getting rich. And so I decided, well, I'm going to try to get rich first, and then that was me. So, yeah, I think it's very, very common. And so you got to be aware of that. And so when I write these essays, they become tossed salads. They've got all kinds of ideas in them, many of which are competing with each other. They're not really. They seem like they're connected, but as you go through them, they become a problem. And the easiest way to find out if they are, for me, is just to look at the FK score. We can talk about that more in a minute, but just in terms of identifying when you're making the mistake of a tossed salad approach to writing, copywriting, any kind of rhetorical writing, I just looked down and I just did something. I've been working on an essay for about 6 hours now, yesterday, and I thought it was brilliant. And right before I sent it out, I did an FK. It was 10.9. So I still am in the aura of thinking it's brilliant, but I know it's not good. I know I'm going to have to revise it dramatically. And I know the problem is I've crammed in too many ideas, and they are competing with each other. And it's going to just confuse readers. It's not going to convince them of anything. I'm just trying to do too much. So just to stay with the point, so the toss salad approach, it's not that it never works. I mean, there's a way of writing copy where if you're selling a book, for example, and you could tease the book by, 38 things you'll discover in this book. That's, to me, not toss salad. That's a different issue. That's illustrating examples of the benefits you're going to get. But to write anything persuasively, I think it's very important to, after you get through all your research and you're thinking about it, to pick one thing that your one core idea or one core insight that you're going to build your copy on. So,
do you feel like that idea? I mean, it occurs to me while you're saying, like, I'm thinking back of in the 90s when I started writing copy, and I think you were already had written for many years, a decade, I don't know, before that, but there were things out like boardrooms, big black books, the big black book, Success in Life, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So as you were talking about how, and they're classically hundreds of bullets, of fascinations and things. And I think that does confuse people sometimes when they say, well, yeah, how about those kinds of promotions or those kinds of ads or teasers that I see, like the 6 different ways to do that or whatever. It's the part that comes after the do that. I just wanted to emphasize that I think that's the one idea. The one idea is that usually those things always occupy some space that's a single idea. So even when you have like the 6 secrets or whatever, what people used to do. But now, I feel like there's so many people out there with the 6 ways to do this, the 7 ways to do that, that you can't, that it all just becomes so much noise.
Right.
I guess what I'm asking is, has it changed? Do you feel like this is just human nature of the people who are reading stuff, that they want the focus, or is it more important than ever, or
all right,
where are we on that?
Good question. And there's 2 parts to it. One is, and my memory span now, John, is down to about 15 seconds. So you're going to have to pay attention so you remind me what I've just said. So one part of this is the boredom reports thing, what's going on there. And the other part is listicles and so on, how, 8 ways to do this, 16 ways to do that. Okay, so as far as I'll start with listicles. As far as the listicles are concerned, I have observed also from looking at not just my own response to my own blogs, but the response to other blogs or across the board. We have loads of information on that. The articles, the blogs that tend to get the most readership are listicles. They're very attractive to people. And I think the reason is because you have if you're reading blogs, you have 10 or 20 blogs that you like to read, and you have a very limited amount of time. And a listicle kind of promises quick and easy information. But those are not the blogs that have the biggest effect on people, that move them the most. I think they're completely unrelated. When I look at I get the most response when I write a very strong package with a single idea. You'll get positive and negative response. The listicles people like, but they're kind of forgettable. And I think that's all our own experience when we read listicles. We kind of look at them in the hope that there'll be a couple little things that we haven't heard before. And so I think that the idea of listicles and getting back to boardroom is the idea that we are always improving ourselves if we're adding bits and pieces to our knowledge. And I believe that the boardroom whole approach was based on an unstated idea, which is that you can improve your life by learning a lot of clever little things, like what never to eat on an airplane, how to get ahead of a line, and this is certainly a common thought we have about life. Many people have about life, and so if you're buying a book for $40 or $30, that can really move you. But it's not going to work if you're selling something for $1,500, and it's not going to convert you into a fan of the guru who wrote it. Boardroom books are basically anonymous. So I think Boardroom did a brilliant job of selling to people that like to accumulate bits and pieces of information, books that were done. And Gene Schwartz did a beautiful job at identifying the little fascinations, as we call them, that made you want to read the book, that made you come to the conclusion, this is worth $39. But right. I mean, do you remember? I don't even know. Did they even have authors? They certainly didn't have gurus. Yeah. So it was a very different approach. So I would say that if you're looking just to get readership, increase your readership, think in terms of listicles. But if you need to sell something, especially when the closer it gets to being more expensive, the more you have to move away from the many things and towards the one very strong thing.
Well, as you say that, and I know we're piling up some things that we're going to get to in a minute. Right. One being the FK score, and another one that I'd like to talk about down the line about recognizing good ideas. One of the things that I have a note on here is the difference between an idea that has some kind of depth in a marketing sense and an idea that's a superficial idea. Mm-hmm. This is like the idea of a big promise or claim versus something that actually establishes a relationship that you can use with a customer on an ongoing basis, which is not everybody's business model.
Right.
But it is the business model for some people.
Right.
I liked those boardroom books when we had boardroom books when I was in an office and there were a bunch of them sitting around. I think I probably have a couple of those boardroom books. I have tons of books that have little bits of tips and life hacks and things like that. I can't remember any of them.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't know who wrote them because the accumulation of that kind of knowledge, I feel that people have shifted in instead of understanding a few things very well, we know where to look up a lot of things very well. We're like a Google mindset. Yeah. But I don't remember any of those things, and I feel like my brain says, "Don't waste time remembering these because you can always look it up."
Yeah, that's
it's a different kind of relationship.
A very interesting point. So we do tend to forget those things, but think about the things there are things that you, and I'm sure we all, are little bitty things that we remember all our lives. Every time I take a bottle of ketchup and I attempt to pour it, I pour it like this. I hold my hand up and I go like this. Because when I was 16, my friend Paul Janis made fun of me for going like this, then too much ketchup came out. I'll never forget that. There's about, 30, 40 things in my life that they're a little tidbit, but they always happened when you had a personal relationship with someone, and so it became meaningful. That problem with the listicle stuff is generally not operate that way. And yeah, I think too that we're kind of deluged with that stuff. But I guess coming back to the key point, if you want to establish a relationship between the product you're selling, especially if it's an information product, what you want to do is establish authority. You want people to believe, here's someone who is smart. He's interested in the same things I am interested in. I can trust him because I can see his biases and his orientation, and he's willing to work hard ahead of me to give me the answers, the solutions, the interpretations that I need to move forward in my life. So, and to do that, I think you need to do the hard work and take the chance. I mean, the other aspect of tossed salad is kind of a chicken shit way of writing a package. It's it's hard if you have 3 great ideas and you only have 1 lead that you're allowed to put into action. Then you're going to have to pick that lead. But I think that hard work that pays off. Of course, sometimes you'll miss, but when you hit, you can have these big hits, and not just big for a short period of time, but you got to have a hit that can last, years, and that you can make millions of dollars from. And this happens when people get that one really good idea that is, and I could just slide right into that now. So it's got to be the right idea at the right time, but it's not just the idea itself; it's the articulation of the idea. It's this many times. I give you the example that we both know that one of Agora's franchises spent 20 years writing 200 promotions, all about. They started out very successfully by writing out how debt was going to ruin the economy, and then for 20 years they kept writing them packages and got mixed results, and then one renegade franchise that didn't believe that at all wrote one package on it and then blew up and made everything much bigger. So it's the articulation. Which is like, what are people thinking, feeling, and believing about this issue right now, and how can I address it, and what one idea can I give them that's going to persuade them. So, my thing is the power, I call it the power of one. A lot of people use that phrase. But for me, for a copywriter, it means one very strong, emotionally engaging idea. It doesn't have to be a correct idea. It has to be an idea that feels right, solves both your intellectual and your emotional problems. You read it and you go, that's so true. But to really make the promotion work, what I recommend is that there are 4 components of it. You've got to get that good idea. It's always good to illustrate it with a story. And, there are good stories and there are bad stories. So my rule is, what I try to find when I'm writing something very long, 1 very good story. You can come up with 8, but find the one that's the best story. And also 1 fact. Sometimes you can sell the whole product. We both know there are very successful speakers that make a whole career out of telling 1 story and then 1 fact, and they're just so compelling in and of themselves. They tell you so much more than the argument, the logical argument would. So to me, it's 1 idea, 1 story, 1 fact, all driving towards 1 inevitable conclusion. That's the formula for writing, for avoiding the tossed salad and focusing on the pool.
Right. Maybe here's a good place to talk about the FK score.
Right. Okay. Try to do this real quick. So years ago in France, I think you were there, we had a Agora meeting with copywriters, and it was about ideas about how to be a good copywriter. And we invited 2 guys there. One was Alex Green, who still writes for us, and it was Steve Sugarwood, who still writes for Stansberry. And they were 2 of our best. They weren't copywriters. They were 2 of our best editorial writers. And I was interested to see what they have to say. And Alex came up and he gave a very, very strong presentation. He presented like 15 things that he does to write good editorial. And I wrote them all down, and I was very excited. It was terrific. And then Steve got up. Steve was like, how Steve is very like, well, I really don't know much about writing, even though I'm the number 1 writer. But I do remember one thing. The one thing I did learn early on was that Mark came in and said that I could never be a writer unless I simplified my FK. And then he explained what FKF is. It's a way to measure how complex your writing structure is, not your ideas. And but then he said, yeah, so I thought that was ridiculous. I have a PhD. I thought that was ridiculous. And so what I did to prove him wrong is I went and I analyzed. I don't know if were you there for this? Did you see this?
Yeah, I remember that. That was
He said,
that
huh?
chateau,
Yeah,
and we were in a tent outside. I remember
that's
that.
right.
Yeah.
And he said, and I analyzed all the Agora writers in terms of FK to prove that. And he said, what I discovered was that there was actually a direct correlation between how low an indirect correlation between FK score and readership, responsiveness, including refunds and everything he was analyzing. And then he said, and the two people that have the lowest FK scores at Agora are Mark Ford and Bill Bonner. And of course, I was very proud of that. Bill was insulted because he felt that, there's this common idea that if you're smarter, then you should have a higher IQ, because they equate erroneously FK scores with grades, grade school comprehension or something. Nothing. The fact is exactly the opposite. The better your idea is, your one single idea, the lower your FK score should be. And the reason why it's high is not because this is what I tell people who try to defend it. It's not because your ideas are so good. It's because they're not that good. And they've got all these competing ideas. Anytime you're writing on the other hand, whereas, blah, 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 you're kind of doing what we were talking about before about showing people into your closet. You're displaying your interesting mind, There's a typical college professor. I'm listening to this college professor talk about Sartre right now. And I mean, this is just unbearable. I'm thinking, no wonder, college is so painful for so many people, because he's constantly, it's as if his entire purpose is just to show you.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, so I have, like I told you, I worship at the altar of the FK. I test my own writing on that basis. And, it's like, if you have a good idea, it's like having a good physique. When you have a really good idea, you don't mind going out with just a very skimpy little bathing suit. But when your idea is not so good, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Maybe something bigger and fluffy to distract your attention might work. So,
yeah, I was going to use the analogy of an officious memo.
Yes.
From, I don't want to talk about anybody who's gone through the Agora halls or whatever. But there was a guy that we both remember who was going to be helping to manage a business when it was growing before you came along,
right.
To help Bill as a partner. And he would send these memos out. He just had an office mindset, which is just not what Agora is, really it was. Yeah. And he would send out these memos that were 4 or 5 paragraphs of 6-syllable words. I mean, it was just insane. And you couldn't even tell what it was that he wanted to have happen.
Right.
And then Bill would say, no, I was saying we should just, do this. Right. And it would be I think that's kind of like when you get the people that officious writing and legalese or academic writing, or you try and read a medical journal that's talking about something that's what they try to do. They load it up with stuff to try to sound smart, and all the jargon and all the other stuff, the idea disappears.
Yeah. The writing becomes about me, the author. Look how smart I am. You follow me. Of course, but rhetorical writing is about you, the listener. We're trying to actually change your mind. And I know there's a limit to this. I will tell you just one more quick story on this, is that I used to go to creative writing camps, for fiction writers. And there would always be a celebrity writer there. And most of them were men. And I remember John Updike in particular. He gave this super erudite discussion about fiction writing that just made me think this guy is a genius. I should just stop writing right now. And then they had Amy Tan there. And Amy Tan got up, she goes, I don't know what to tell you about writing. I just want you to read the first short story. I'm going to read my first short story I tried to get published. And she read it, and it was absolutely horrible. And later on, I bumped into her in a restaurant in Italy. And I told her how grateful I was that she did that, that she was giving to the audience. She was giving them permission to write. And so I guess we're talking now about this element of ego or arrogance, and and it's not about me; it's about you. And if you want a result, like in her case, if she wanted people to start writing more, well, maybe John Updike probably got his result too. He wanted all these damn kids at the writing conference to stop writing because they're never going to be any good anyway. But there you go.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So if we could, so if the idea is that the big mistake that writers make is that they just try and jam too many ideas into things, and that maybe that happens because they don't know the subject matter well, or they don't know any one of the ideas so well enough that they can explore it. That leads around to this idea that this is especially true for Agora and everything that we've been involved with in years, and all the other writers that they have there. It's the idea, the quality of a big idea. So how does, this is a question that people ask. It's almost like the question that, I know you taught English for a while. You get somebody who says, well, how long does the paper have to be? Or that kind of question. It's like, right. Well, that's kind of off topic. But the new writers say, well, how do you get big ideas? So how do you answer that question?
Well, I can only tell you how I get ideas, or I want to call them emotionally compelling ideas rather than big ideas, because it seems like I think there are emotionally compelling ideas, and there are big ideas, and there are big emotionally compelling ideas. The End of America was a big emotionally compelling idea. There are other ideas that are very emotionally compelling, but they're smaller ideas, and they will work for promotion. So for me, the way I get emotionally compelling ideas is by reading and discovering them. I occasionally come up with them on my own when I'm reflecting. But for me, an emotionally compelling idea is when you've been thinking about or talking about a certain subject, and then suddenly two things click together, and you get an insight that makes you feel like you took a step forward. To me, it most commonly happens when I'm reading, and in other words, I get it from somebody else, and I'm reading and I'm going, oh, that's good. I like that. And my advice is, when you get that as a writer, trust that and take that down. It doesn't mean that that's going to be your final big idea, but unless you have that feeling, unless you get that feeling, you don't have a big idea. And that's the problem with people borrowing from other people. They say, oh, well, this idea worked before, so I'm going to imitate it. But it's the articulation of the idea. And they didn't borrow it because it created that sense in themselves. They borrowed it because they thought they could knock it off. And so that's not going to be the new big idea. You can, if you're a good knockoff artist, you can get 50% or 30% of what the original guy did with the good idea for a certain period of time until the top moves on. But I would say this, and it's funny because my son Michael pointed this out to me, and I hadn't thought about it. And this is a big problem today. You're never going to get those great moments of aha when you're reading if you're Googling, because Googling is designed to give you the most common commonly searched answers to the most common questions. You got to get to page 18 before you even start to get into things that are interesting. But even there, it tends to be amateurish, most of Google. Bloggers and
Right.
the place to get really good ideas on a subject, if it's information that you're selling, Michael said, and I think he's right, you have to read books.
Yeah. Mike Palmer said that too.
Did he?
Yeah. I think that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I think you have to read books, and because think of it, for those of us who have written books are way harder than writing an essay, way harder, 100 times harder. All these little crappy ideas that can work in 600 words won't work in a 60,000 word book. You have to really get deeper. You have to think things through. And these are people that write books, this is their life. They're putting their whole life into it. They write 2 or 3 books on a particular subject, and those give you a little bit of. I remember when I was in graduate school, I worked. I got an assistantship for this guy named Robert Corrigan. He was a critic, a theater critic. But and he wrote like 2 books or 3 books, but one of them explained to me what the difference between modern theater and classical theater, and in doing that, explained to me the difference between modern movies. It was like there was a core insight I got from that I won't bother our viewers with, but that lasted my whole life. And the moment I read that, I was like, wow, this is really good. This is going to help me. This is very exciting. I can't wait to tell somebody this. And that's where I think you get it. And by the way, I got that. That was a very competitive position to work for him. And I got that job because when he interviewed me, I pretended that I had come up with his idea myself. I've been thinking, and I said this, and he decided I must have been very smart. So anyway, that's where I think the real stuff is going to come from. Yeah. If you get it and you get excited, and remember, even if you're a beginning copywriter, even if this isn't about getting the most profound idea, because we're generally writing to people that are more or less beginners in whatever it is that they're buying, with different degrees depending on health people tend to be a little more sophisticated than investors in terms of understanding the subject matter they're going about. So, but it's okay if you're new, because most of your customers will be new. But just trust when you come across an insight, doesn't even have to be an idea, then jump on it, because it could make a difference. But remember that rhetoric is what we're doing in rhetoric depends on what our objective is. And most of the time, when you're writing advertising copy, you're selling products that people already want to buy, products and information people already want to buy. So that's the thing we have to. So my point is this: that stick to rule of 1. Look for your good idea. Then look for, among the countless stories that you have, the one that just tells it the best, the most succinctly. Yeah. Ideally, it could be told in a paragraph. And then look for that one fact. Now, of course, you can have 40 things later on in the package, but if you can get one fact, one story to support and illustrate your big idea in the lead, you've done a lot of work by then. People are ready to go with you. Mm-hmm. That's my point on that.
Yeah, and so we can wrap it up. But the other benefit, I think, of finding this one story to tell, this one idea to write about, is that while it's a lot of work to get to the one idea, once the one idea is set,
right,
the rest of the work becomes so much easier. Right. Because you have to. I was saying this. The other person was talking to me earlier about the mistake that writers make. I was saying that a lot of writers look at the challenge of the blank page. I don't have an idea, etc. And it's that idea of writer's block is kind of a misconception, I think, of what you're trying to do when you're writing. So it's not about finding so much finding the thing to write about as it is finding the things not to write about.
Mm.
Because there's a lot you could
Yeah.
cover.
Yeah.
You're trying to pare it away and
Yeah.
eliminate stuff
Yeah.
so that you get to one thing.
Yeah. Well, certainly if you start out with the longest piece and it ends up with a case score of 10 or 12, then it's all about deletions. And, we don't like to delete those paragraphs. I just did it this morning. I had 3 nice paragraphs I thought were but I had to face the fact they weren't advancing the narrative. They weren't getting me where I had to go. So just a little trick. Most of what I do is I try to be pragmatic for writers. But as a trick, what I do, if it helps, this is like getting rid of your clothes, a Marie Kondo approach. You take those things and you just put them in a pantry where you can pull them out again. Just don't delete them, and it makes it much easier to just eventually that it'll be loaded. But
I keep a spare. I open a second page and I cut it and I paste it into the other page, and then I save it like whatever the name of the project bits. Like I'm
right,
ever going to go back to it because I could
right,
use it for a space ad or something. I don't know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then
That's just what I do with the clothes that I can't get rid of. I put them literally in a plastic box, and then I leave them by my closet for like 3 months, and then I put them in the garage,
and
and then
then Kathy
eventually,
sneaks them out to the trash when you're
yeah,
not looking.
probably right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks. That was a lot of good stuff. Is there anything that you want me to? You don't really need anything pitched or anything like that, I don't think. But
No,
I mean, I always
you
tell
can
people
mention my
go get.
blog if they want to look at my blog.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, markford.net.
Markford.net. Okay. And I always tell people, I know it's one of many books, but Ready, Fire, Aim is a book that people should go find because I think that
Yeah, yeah. Thank
that's
you.
got a lot of great stuff in it.
I'm actually revising it right now. I don't know why, but new and improved version. I got them to 100 million. This is going to get them to 1 billion. So,
Yeah.
right.
All right. Listen, thanks very much, and
Okay.
always a pleasure to talk to you. Always learn something, and I go away inspired too. So that I think that's great.
Thanks, John.
Take care, and talk to you soon.
All right. Bye bye.